Welcome back. In this video on muscle physiology, we're going to look at the response and adaptation of skeletal muscle to exercise in brief. I will point out at the beginning of this particular video, it's not important for you to know all of the genes and signaling kinases that I'm going to mention at this point in time, but to understand the general concept and principle of transcription and translation of new proteins and muscle adaptation. So there is a good paper which I will include with the slides by Brendan Egan and Julian Zirat, kind of summarizing the overall adaptation and response to exercise in skeletal muscle, and that's summarized here in this kind of takeaway diagram. Again, like I pointed out, there are a lot of genes and signaling kinases referred to here, and you don't need to understand this level of detail for your own particular purposes. But we'll go through the overall response and what's happening. But this paper is well worth reading if you're interested. So, the proposed mechanism of transcriptional control. So, if you imagine if you exercise today, it may be new type of exercise to you. Maybe you lift some heavier weights than you've been used to. Maybe you haven't been exercising for a while. You'll try to do something and you won't be particularly good at it. And the idea of training is that over time, if you repeat this, you'll adapt and you'll start to improve and you'll get better. And one of the reasons that is because the body is very smart, the muscle is very smart. When you try and ask it to do some type of exercise today that it is not used to or not accustomed to, it won't be able to perform it very well, but it will try to adapt. And there will certain limiting factors within the muscle that won't have allowed it to perform and do what you wanted it to do, or as well as you wanted it to do. And it will try and source those and start to make the components required so that the next time you ask it to do the same thing, that it can perform it better. So if we have an acute bout of exercise, what we generally see is a higher turnover in ATP. Okay, so greater turnover in energy associated with the exercise, and that's picked up by a signal transducer here by an increase in the ratio of AMP to ATP. So this is just sensing ATP turnover. We have an increase in the calcium flux from the sarcoplasmic reticulum, which we mentioned earlier. So calcium will be fluxing in and out of the sarcoplasmic reticulum to facilitate the cross-bridge cycle, and we've an increase in redox activity associated with the electron transport chain and oxidative phosphorylation or oxidative muscle metabolism that we mentioned in one of the previous videos also. So all you need to know is here is these are sensing the perturbations in the muscle, and particularly in terms of energy. And these signals are picked up and they converge on a regulator of metabolism, this PGC1 alpha. Again, you don't need to know this, but this is a transcriptional coactivator. And what this will do is it will increase transcription of mitochondrial and metabolic genes within the muscle. And by increasing this transcription and by some of these transcriptional markers being converted into new proteins, the muscle adapts, changes, and hopefully or intuitively gets better. So what you have here is your acute exercise is a stimulus. Then you have this perturbation to homeostasis, to the energy balance within the muscle. We sense this within the muscle, and then we transduce this signal, and we have a transcriptional adaptation. So if we take this metabolic master regulator, a transcriptional coactivator, PGC1 alpha, again, it's not important for you to remember what PGC1 alpha is, but it controls genes associated with glucose oxidation, so the ability to break down glucose to produce ATP, and the ability to increase the number of mitochondria where those ATP can be produced. So if you've got more mitochondria, you can produce more ATP more rapidly and therefore exercise at a higher rate. So if you're an endurance runner and you've got more mitochondria, you're going to perform better. It also helps fat oxidation, so breaking down fat to produce ATP. And it also improves mitochondrial protein expression. So even though you have more mitochondria, the proteins even within those mitochondria which are involved in breaking down fats and glucoses and so on, they are increased. So that's even after just one bout of exercise. So what you have is, if you imagine this is the transcriptional response, here's your the level of transcriptional activity at baseline before your bout of exercise. Here's what it looks like over the 24 hours following exercise. It then comes back down, and you have a little bit more transcriptional activity than you did on the first day. You have another bout of exercise, comes back down. Again, you've adapted a little bit, and over time we have this what looks like a sawtooth type effect, and that we're accumulating more of these proteins over time, and therefore adapting the muscle. So here's what we're looking to do, which is have an increase in the protein synthesis. So our exercise impacts this pathway, and again, I don't want you to get bogged down with any of the letters which are involved in this pathway. One key part here is mTOR is activated, and it allows us to create new proteins. So even when we feed, we create a little bit more protein in the muscle, and then we have a period, between meals where we don't. And if we introduce exercise with feeding, we get a greater increase in the amount of this kind of protein synthesis and this adaptation. And by increasing these proteins, effectively we now have more of what we need to perform either our weightlifting exercise or our run or our sprint or our cycling or whatever it might be. And that's how the muscle adapts over time. So eventually you move from having this kind of smaller diameter sarcomere, which we referred to in one of the earlier videos, to a much wider diameter sarcomere, capable of generating more force, capable of accessing more ATP more quickly, contracting more quickly, more readily, greater endurance, and thus greater performance. Okay, thank you.